Welcome back to Mornings with the Mandalorian, the show where we talk about our first reactions, filmmaking techniques, and connections to the greater Star Wars universe within the Emmy Award-winning show, The Mandalorian, now streaming on Disney Plus. I'm your host, Spencer Chandler. Here with me, as always, is my co-host, Christian Miller.
What's up? You kind of froze for a second,
Yeah,
so
Zoom,
that's why I'm
Zoom,
late
Zoom being
and
a
saying
little
what's up.
sketchy, but it's okay. Well, we're gonna deal with
Yeah,
some
but
possible internet
we'll do
failures
our,
today.
we'll do our best to stay connected.
Yeah, but it's all right because we get to talk about The Mandalorian, and it's always a good day whenever we get to talk about that, especially this week. I think this is a really intriguing episode, and people can get a lot of people have been getting pretty heated over this episode,
Okay,
Christian.
now I'm just gonna say that I had some strawberry sauce or like chocolate sauce and ice cream. It's pretty tasty, gotta say. It's fried, freaking dough. All right, you back, Spencer?
Yes, I'm back. I've been talking about how people have been getting pretty heated over this episode. I don't know if you've seen this on the
I
interwebs.
was I was talking about churros.
Oh, epic. This is the joys of Zoom recording. We both start talking about different things and we can't hear each other.
So you didn't get any of that?
No, I heard the last point and I heard fried freaking dough. As I finished talking about how controversial this episode has been within the community.
I
Oh, that was good. That's too
so
good
yeah,
to cut out. That's too good to cut out.
Yeah,
Oh
I've picked
man.
up on a little bit of the controversy. I mean, I don't know if I've just like cultivated a social media where I don't see any of the haters. Um, so I haven't really seen people like mad about this, but I definitely don't see people like in general like excited about this episode. And like we said last week, I feel like The Mandalorian isn't as like widespread popular as it used to be.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who like saw the first season, and when I talk to them, just people from back home, whenever I talk to them about like, hey, have you seen the newest season yet? They're like, no, I haven't seen it, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, must not be as popular as it was last season, but I mean, that's what we talked about last week, and that's just proof.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really care like how popular it is. Ultimately, I'm just like wanting it to be a good story. Um, but I don't know. It's just interesting how things have changed from year to year.
Yeah, like you said, I don't care about how many people watch it. I just care that I watch it, and then it's good.
Yeah.
Because I want a good
It
Star
could
Wars story.
it could be that like the pandemic has changed so many things about media to where like everything is just like people are watching so many different things now, and Disney Plus even like itself is not a brand new thing, so people are just sort of used to just like so much content
Yeah,
since quarantine. And so what's a new show, you know?
that makes sense. I know that we both had uh that thing at the beginning of like August where we texted our group chat and we're like we're used to there being too much time and not enough stuff to watch, but now because of quarantine there's too much stuff to watch and not enough time. Um
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people could be facing that now, especially with going back to school and having to deal with like holidays coming up and planning for that and everything. So it's a hectic time, and everything else going on in the US currently. Yeah, hectic time. I guess people don't get online to watch as much. Um, but we did, and that's what we're here to talk about. Um, so we're here to talk about episode 10, The
Eh,
Passenger.
chapter 10.
Chapter
Remember,
10, The
this is
Passenger.
this is a novel.
Yes,
It's
it
not a
is.
show.
But we were a little bit curious on who the passenger would be for this episode. But before we get into any specifics, Christian, how did you watch this episode and what were your first reactions?
So I did not stay up until the early hours of the morning to watch it this time.
Me neither.
I wanted to, but I think I just got too tired, and I had stuff to do the next day, and so I didn't get around to it until like 5 in the evening. Watched it with laptop and headphones, or actually laptop and Bluetooth speaker. Um, and then the next day I watched it on TV by myself, and then that same night watched it with my sister because she had not yet seen it. Um, and yeah, my first reaction, uh, especially at the first viewing, was that um, I don't know, it was very tense. Like it was much more tense than any of the other episodes, I feel like. Um, I would say I got frustrated more with the Mandalorian this time. Not in like a like I don't know. I liked it. It's not like I didn't like him. I just like knew that he was like making a bunch of mistakes, and this was an important chapter for him to learn a bunch of things. But I don't know. So many things he did, I'm just like, you're doing all the things wrong. And then we'll get to the third act of this episode, but like, that part especially was very like horrific in a lot of ways and scary. Um, I don't know. It was a very fun, just sort of, I don't know how we're gonna get out of this one kind of episode.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
Well, I only watched this episode once, like always, but what I normally do for episodes of The Mandalorian is I watch the episode and then I like listen to maybe a podcast or a long YouTube video about it, and then I read articles about it, which is the same thing I did this week. So I watched this episode with my girlfriend on Saturday. So I waited a little bit. We watched it together, and we had our first reactions. And we both, at the beginning of the episode, were like, "Ah, look, Baby Yoda's so cute in this episode." And then we're like, "Oh, okay. This took a turn that we did not expect." So, like you, it was very tense, and we were both like, "All right, what's gonna happen?" And this does not seem like a situation that he's gonna be able to get out of. And I think I audibly at one point said, how in the world is he gonna like get out of this? Like this doesn't make sense because he's not a professional mechanic. Um, and then somehow it works. But he gets out. And then I listened to a podcast that you sent me for this week. Got some good information out of that. And then I read a few articles about like summarizing and going deeper analysis and about some Easter eggs that we'll talk about at the end of this episode. So overall, I thought it was a really good episode. A lot of people are giving it crap for being a filler episode, but I think it's the good type of one-off, or it may not be a one-off. This may be really important. We'll have to see uh, how the story goes from here.
Yeah. I mean, I think for the people who were watching the show for like lots of different Star Wars connections, there weren't as many this time around.
Yeah,
And I mean, I get excited for those connections, but it's not what I'm here for. I'm ultimately here for just a a mythical journey with Mando and Baby Yoda, and everything else is just icing on the cake. And so this had less connections, and it's in a lot of people's opinions, people who value this sort of thing, it didn't necessarily advance the story. It's sort of like it was like a side quest, and then literally it just sort of goes down into a hole. Like if people who want progression aren't getting that. People who are wanting to answer the mystery of Baby Yoda and like the villains and everything, they're not getting that. I'm personally fine with this sort of storytelling because I think it's great to step back and sort of like get into Mando's head. And a lot of things in this episode are just sort of very much rooted in his character. And it's just, I don't know. I love the sort of new direction they're going with season 2. That it's not necessarily an arc thing. Like the first season, the first 3 episodes were kind of an arc. This one, it feels different. And one more thing, because I've been talking for a long time. This because I kind of was stalling because I was forgetting my point, but this is the point. So this episode, even though what people would think that it's filler, it redeems the episodes that they thought were insignificant last season, and even
yeah,
the first one did as well, because the first one tied into the gunslinger, and this one tied into the prisoner.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
and even in season 1, you had things that tied back to Sanctuary with Kara, but I don't know. It's continuing to prove that these insignificant episodes connect further for people who always want to just things to be linear, progressing sort of story. But it's also just a fun side episode that I think anyone should be able to enjoy.
Yeah, I feel like calling it a filler episode has a really bad connotation to it, and it makes it sound like, I feel like when anyone says that, they're most of the time dissing that it's not a part of an overall arc. But you also can't say that an episode's a filler episode until you see the episode after it, because you don't know. Like
Yeah.
maybe the stuff that we see in this episode is like the most important thing about the next episode. In that case, it's not a filler episode. So who knows?
But also, I don't really like the term filler because
Yeah, I don't either.
like what's being filled? Like it implies that it's like information, and it's like why are you watching a show if it's for information?
It also
Like it's
implies
about an
that
emotional story.
it also implies that this is a way of wasting time because you don't have anything good to say. So I also feel like that's wrong, because this is
Yeah.
a really good episode, which you can learn a lot about the characters in this episode, because they're all stuck together and you have to learn about each other when you're stuck in a ship together.
Yeah. And I mean, some of these podcasts, I guess, to do like first reactions that we've both listened to, it's like their first takeaway is like, well, this is sort of a filler. So I wouldn't say I super like it. It was probably like a 5 or 6 in my ratings. And it's like, well, before you even say that, like, did you watch the episode? Like just because it wasn't what you thought was like impactful, like go, just like actually absorb what it was. Like instead of what it wasn't, talk about what it was.
Yeah, I love
And
these
that's
episodes.
what we're gonna try to do with these podcasts. Is that we're gonna try to take into account what the show actually is, and take it for what it is every week.
Yeah, I love these episodes that they may not be huge and, action crazy, even though the end of this one does get a little action crazy. And they may not cover a giant story arc, but you get to know the characters more intimately than I think you can when they're too busy interacting with 20,000 characters in one episode. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just a good look into what goes on with these main characters, and when they interact with people we've never seen before, they may not talk to again. In the case of Frog Lady.
Yeah. So, are you ready for a synopsis?
I think so. I've prepared slightly my synopsis for this week. All right, so we start off beginning of or end of last episode. Mando is going back to Mos Eisley to get the Razor Crest, and on the way he gets attacked by 3 what we can assume are bounty hunters looking for the child. They basically crash his speeder, and they cause Baby Yoda to go flying. Which, how in the world does he survive that? Because he's a baby. But whatever. Mando's able to kill 2 of them, and then the other one basically puts a knife to Baby Yoda's throat. Long story short, Mando trades his jetpack, and then launches the jetpack so high that the guy falls off and dies. He then has to carry all of his stuff back to Mos Eisley, where he and Pelimoto cook up that crate dragon meat, have a nice dinner, and then he's off to find a covert of Mandalorians, who Pelimoto says that she knows someone whose husband knows about the covert. So we see Frog Lady, and we meet her. She has her children, her unborn eggs with her, and she says that they cannot travel at light speed, so they must travel sub-light. So they're having to travel very slowly. And as they're traveling, they meet up with these 2 X-Wings, who are part of the New Republic, who say there's an arrest warrant out for Mando because he helped break a prisoner out of prison, which we saw from the prisoner from last episode.
They didn't say that right away, though.
No. They were trying to just check his logistics, make sure he was not Empire, I guess, left over. And then they ran his schematics, realize there's a warrant out. So they start chasing him. He gets into this cave where he basically crashes, and he has to fix up the Razor Crest. And in the process, Baby Yoda starts munching on some Frog Lady eggs. just like wafting them down whole. And then the frog lady kind of goes out to find warmth so she can protect her babies. She finds this hot spring. And so then Mando goes, finds her, and is starting to like get her back to the ship when Baby Yoda eats a spider egg. He like rips open a spider egg and eats the spider, and all of a sudden it's like the end of Alien, where all the spiders all hatch at the same time. They start chasing them back to the ship. They finally get into the ship, and the cockpit is the only safe place because it's the only place not riddled with holes in the Razor Crest at this point. Frog Lady saves Baby Yoda from one of those spiders. And then when a giant one lands on top of the Razor Crest, you think it's over for all of them. And then all of a sudden, somebody shoots all the spiders and kills them all. And it's the 2 X-Wing fighters from the beginning. And they say that since Mando left 3 other prisoners when he broke the one out, they're going to let him slide for this one time. And so they let him be. Mando fixes up the Razor Crest enough for it to run, and they all have to stay in the cockpit as they keep going off to meet Frog Lady's husband at the end of the episode, with only half of her children remaining, approximately, because Baby Yoda ate the rest. I probably missed little details in there, but we'll cover them throughout the episode. How was that? Was that a decent synopsis?
Yeah, the only thing missing is that the whole thing with like Zero, her reprogramming the
Oh
droid.
yes, he does. She does. She cannot speak. What's it called? Basic, I guess, is what they call English. She can't speak that, and Mando doesn't speak Frog Lady. And so she reprograms Zero, who is still left in the Razor Crest, to be able to speak through his translation system to Mando, which is really cool, by the way. And he starts like going berserk because he thinks that she like fixed him, but really she's just using him as a translator, which is really cool. So
and also they're unfertilized eggs, so it's not like they're like tadpoles. It's like the chicken eggs that we eat. So they're not yet sentient.
Exactly. So Baby Yoda's not eating living things quite yet. We will say that. They're unfertilized because she's been apart from her who's band. But either way, that kind of sucks. Like either way, Baby Yoda's still eating her eggs.
So what I had originally thought was that she was an endangered species because it's like it seemed like that's what they were implying, but it could just be her family because it said the last of her line. So she might not be endangered. It could just be like they're continuing their, whatever their last name is. Their last name is probably like Filoni or something.
Yeah, but either way, I wouldn't want someone eating my children necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the controversy for this episode comes, is that some people are starting to like not like Baby Yoda because they say he's like being a douchebag or like a jerk, because he has like no regard for other people's like children. But you also have to think the first thing that we see Baby Yoda eat in season 1 is a frog.
Yeah, that's his species. That's his bread and butter, I guess you could say.
Yeah. In the podcast we listened to, someone mentioned that they thought that he was maybe protecting them in his stomach until he ate the spider. And then they're like, nope, never mind. He just ate him. I never got the feeling that he was protecting them. I don't know if you did. I just got the feeling that he was just straight up eating them.
It's weird because when I first like those shots of him like gazing at them through the glass, I didn't think he was gonna eat them. I thought he was like it was another one of those force sensitive scenes where he was just enamored with life, and that he's just like connecting somehow, and then he plops one into his mouth, and I'm just like, That is not the direction I thought this was
No,
going.
I was watching with Katie, and when he puts his face next to the glass and looks at him, I was like, "Oh, look, he knows that they're babies too, and he wants to stick together." And then he ate, and Katie goes, "What the heck just happened?" And I was like, "I don't know." Like it was such an audible, like we were both so concerned that he just ate one. Um, oh, it was so funny. But yeah, also not funny. But yeah, like I said, that's a lot of the controversy of this episode is that people are starting to not like Baby Yoda, and are starting to think that maybe Mando might be a bad parent because he's not watching Baby Yoda enough. But I
Yeah,
give him the benefit of the doubt. He's only 50
that's
years
what I
old.
got the most out of this.
Is that Mando's a bad parent?
What was that?
Is you said the most you got out of it, or the biggest thing you got out of it is that Mando's a bad parent, or just
Well,
maybe
not just
doesn't
that.
watch
It's
him
just
enough?
like this episode. It really dealt with his shortcomings and just the and him interacting with the frog lady it was a good contrast. Um, so like we see him in the first scene, and he like, he's the way that the skitter is like roaring through the desert, like that, like it sort of supports the sort of thing that he's like overconfident. Um, so like from the opening of the episode where the baby Yoda like react to him killing the guy with the jetpack, it just feels so like, I don't know. It was a good setup for the episode because it seemed like if Baby Yoda is sort of getting tired of the violence, um, and that like that Mando needs to make up for his shortcomings, I guess. And so when he gets in contact with the frog lady, this was actually mentioned in the Sky Talkers episode. We've mentioned this podcast a lot, but they analyzed episode chapter 9, and they were talking about like sort of the mythical implications of the Mandalorian and how he represents like one half of the gender binary, and like he's like the violent male sort of figure, and that he needs, as he's trying to complete his character, he needs to integrate some of the more feminine qualities. And so like, and like they were hoping that there would be this feminine character, or like especially a mother character, to sort of counterbalance him. And I think even down the line, like there's like possibilities of like a romance thing too, but like I think they talked about some of that, but also just in general these types of characters that would really complement him. And this episode, like right away, that's what we got. We got this mother character who was at odds with him in a lot of ways, and the fact that they don't speak the same language and they don't understand each other feels so like that's so on purpose. It's not just like it's an excuse to having a fun alien. It's like he is so used to his ways of just like, I protect, I fight people who are trying to fight me, and that's all I need to, as long as we're alive, we're fine. But it's like you can't just like protect against the negative to if to infuse with the positive. Um and so like the fact that he can't understand the mother character feels like a really cool choice.
Yeah, there's also the problem that in the last episode we see that he is like the link between Mos Pelgo and the Tuscans. So he's used to being the one who's like taking control of the situation. He's leading, and everything is the way he says, kind of, to an extent. But he's able to understand everyone and kind of make sure that everyone's on the same page. Whereas now he's so lost because all of a sudden he doesn't speak the language that like
Mm-hmm.
because we now know that he speaks basic Tuscan and Huttese,
Yeah.
and this woman speaks none of them. And so we finally find him speaking a language, or someone speaking a language that he doesn't, and he's like so out of his comfort zone. And at one point, he literally just goes, "Okay, lady, I don't speak frog. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know."
and he's every like from the point where he's like evading the X-wings, like he's like doubling down on the things that he knows have worked for him in the past. And
He's
this
being
is
very
it's
passive, yeah.
what do you mean?
With like, so when they're like, "Hey, we need you to send me that stuff," he's like, "Oh, well, that's not working right now,"
Well,
because I guess it's
I mean,
being very
I guess
passive.
that would qualify as passive, but like the way that like he's not really interacting, like he's not going to use his word to get out of something. It's like I'm going to rely on my skills as a fighter. He's not attacking the X-wings, but he's like I just this is going to lead to violence because he assumes that everything's going to lead to violence because that's always really faced. Um, and he's finding that these like the solutions that have worked for him in the past aren't always going to work, and he's going to have to find new ways to survive, I guess.
Yeah.
And so the fact that at the end the X-wings rescue him and they're like, "Hey, we weren't gonna shoot at you at all from the beginning. You look really stupid now. Like
Yeah.
this is not like you need to rethink how other people are gonna act around you. Not everyone is the same."
Yeah. And before we get too far into the episode, I do have a few quick facts uh about Frog Lady. That's her, I think, official name on IMDb is Frog Lady. Um anyway, we have seen her before. Last season she was in Mos Eisley Cantina. We saw her a little bit when he was in there. I forget why he was in there, who he was talking to exactly, but Frog Lady's in the background of the cantina in season 1. Uh, and then she's also in the trailer for this season. In the shot at the dock of Mando walking, we see Frog Lady and her husband walking off to the left in the trailer. So we can assume that she's going to be in at least one other episode, and that we'll see her maybe it's just enough for her to be like, "Thanks," and then walk off. We're not too sure. But also, the voice of a Frog Lady is D. Bradley Baker, who voiced the clones in Clone Wars. But she is being physically played by Misty Rosas, who was the actor for Quill in last season. So very cool. Are you still there, Christian, or is your internet crapping out?
I'm here. I'm back.
Yeah. So, did you know this was going to be Misty Rosas before, or did I not? Am I the only one that didn't know that going into this episode?
I didn't know until the credits. I mean I didn't remember her name, but when it said Misty Rosas, I was like, that's probably who played Frog Lady. I'll find out later. If that's a person
Okay.
that I would know.
And I would have
Um,
literally never guessed that D. Bradley Baker was the voice of Frog Lady. She barely spoke anything, so I guess that would help. But yeah, so the voice of the clones from Clone Wars. That was a cool fact.
Yeah, like D. Bradley Baker most of the time doesn't have like a recognizable voice. Like at this point, he's just like the sound of Star Wars. You know, like
Yeah.
if there's something that's like only exists within Star Wars, and that like it's sort of like with like Ben Burt and like the sound design stuff he did with like the lasers and the lightsabers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's basically the same thing actually. It's like D. Bradley Baker uses his voice as like an instrument. It's less of an actor thing, and it's just like he's just inhabiting the entire galaxy, and it's really cool.
Yeah, and if you look at his like things that he's done, he's mostly only done animated stuff. So that's just, he's a very talented voice actor who can do many things. And this is just another example. We also get a cameo by Dave Filoni as one of the X-wing pilots again, because is this supposed to be the same X-wing pilot from season 1?
Yeah, Trapper Wolf.
Okay, so Dave Filoni has now been in, after last season, he said he never wanted to do it again, and then he did it again in this episode. I think it's funny, but I'm also not upset about it. I like seeing Dave Filoni in some cameos every once in a while. And I forget the name of the other guy. That's the one I didn't write down. The other X-Wing pilot. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but in the podcast that we listened to, it is said that he is a ginormous Star Wars nerd. And so that was really cool to see him in a role like that. Christian, do you know his name off the top of my head? Or off the top of your head? Off the top of your head, not my head. No.
Don't know anything off the top of your head.
Thank you.
I know the character's name is Carson Tavis, and I forget the actor's name, but he's apparently very engaged within the nerd community.
Yeah, so it was very cool to see him in a role that he could very much enjoy. Maybe we'll see Dave Filoni in next season as the same X-Wing pilot again, if he keeps up this going. So I guess let's just go chronologically. We talked about the beginning, Baby Yoda reacting to Mando just killing people again. So then we get Mando coming into the bar, talk to Pelimoto about getting passage. She introduces him to Frog Lady. They get on the Razor Crest, and this is where the X-Wings show up. And I remember audibly saying, "Oh crap," when the X-Wings split. Yeah, I was like, "Oh crap." And Katie, who is not like the biggest nerd of Star Wars, said, "Wait, why'd you say oh crap?" And I was like, "Because they're gonna fight him now."
Yeah.
As soon as that happened, I'm probably like one of very few people who were like, "Oh, okay, that this is happening now." But it was really cool to see like a chase through the icy planet. But I guess we don't get a lot to talk about until he crash lands, and he finally has to have that interaction between him and Frog Lady. That's a very interesting one, because while she's trying to protect her kids, Mando's trying to fix his ship, while Baby Yoda's trying to eat the eggs. And so there's just this big jumble of like everybody's trying to do a task at the same time, and they can't figure out who the imposter is. And like they just need to get out of here. No Among Us references.
No, I don't see how that's relevant.
It wasn't. I just said tasks and I thought of Among Us, but yeah. So what's
pretty sus, dude?
Thank you. What was one of your like beats during this sequence that you like stuck out to you, while like everybody's just like chilling out?
Well, in the chase sequence, the visual effects and sound design was, it's amazing how far they progressed just in the last season. And I gotta say, I don't even need to drag J.J. Abrams into this, but like, J.J. Abrams brought in the idea of atmospheric, big like air chase scenes. In terms of like, there have been atmospheric scenes like this in like the prequels, I think, but like really using like basically the dogfight kind of style, but just not in space, like on a planet. I feel like this was used way better than the ones that he's done, and it just felt so visceral because you have the camera like doing crash zooms. It's like whip panning along with the ships. It was just it's more dynamic way of doing it that I really enjoyed.
From a special effects standpoint, it's also 10 times harder to do that atmospheric shots, because not only are you rendering camera moves and CGI ships that are interacting with each other, but you're also having to render clouds and like realistic clouds, and how those clouds will interact with something going at like 300 miles an hour past it. Like how do these clouds like interact when you hit it with a ship? And that's just so hard for like a lot of things to do, and it can easily look bad. It's so much easier to just do this and rotoscope it into space, because there's no 3D to space. You put a black background on it and you put stars,
and it's basically like you're inside a sphere. Because like whenever the ships move and the camera moves, like it looks like you're on the inside of a ball, and that's where the stars move.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the only thing 3D about it.
Exactly. And it's just so much harder from a special effects standpoint to do this atmospheric stuff. And it just, when it's done well, like it was in this episode, it just looks amazing. And we remember seeing this shot in the trailers, and I remember kind of geeking out about it. I was like, that's really cool. Like that's a really good shot in the trailers.
Do you mean when he's getting like when they're going through the clouds, or when he's like when the Razor Crest is like dragging across the ice?
I'm mainly talking about the clouds, like when they're just racing through the clouds. I'm like, that's really cool. Like that's something that we haven't really seen in Star Wars a whole lot, and I'm glad they kind of like. It's not even that big of a deal. I just think it's cool because it's very visually interesting. It's not just all black anymore. And so more to look at. But then, yeah, the ice planet looks amazing. I assume that most of this was shot on the volume. I know last episode, I know I said most of it was shot on the volume, but a lot of the indoor stuff was shot on a real set. So like the cantina is a real set, and the tavern in Mospelgo is a real set. But other than that, yeah, everything is volume. So I'm fairly certain that the entire ice planet was volume. I think, but we'll see because stuff will come out this week after we record this, proving me wrong probably.
And apparently the ice planet is the same one from the first episode, where he fights off the walrus.
Oh yeah,
the ice walrus, which is apparently called a mithril. I feel like I've heard that a bunch of times, but I'm like, for the longest time, I had no idea what a mithril was.
Did they say it in the first episode last season? I think they did.
Yeah, I think Brian Posehn's character says something about the mithril. But as for planet names, this show is really bad at naming planets.
Yeah.
It's always just like, oh, we're in the ice now, and now we're on a desert. Oh, this is a different desert from that other desert. We didn't even get Navarro's planet name until like episode 7.
Yeah, we get Navarro, and then we get Tatooine, but then we get the name of the planet that he's on in Bryce Dallas Howard's episode?
Sorgan.
That's right. So we do get that one.
The one in episode in chapter 2 with Queel, that's been named on like Wikipedia, but it's not in it's kind of annoying.
Oh, so the one that we found the baby on is not even named?
That's what I was talking about.
That's crazy. I didn't even think about the fact that we didn't know the name of that planet.
I mean, it's on Wikipedia somewhere, but it's not in the show.
Okay. So yeah, we don't know the name of this ice planet, but it's the same one from the first episode. So not only are there giant like ice monster creatures in the frozen lakes, but there's also giant freaking spiders that can scare the pants off anybody with arachnophobia. So yeah, so I guess we'll zoom ahead to where Frog Lady is in the hot tub area. She is already reprogrammed Zero at this point, I think. Yeah, she's already reprogrammed Zero. She's talking to Mando about how she really needs to like get off this planet. She goes and she's
to incubate her eggs.
Yes, in the nice warm hot spring that they find. So she's sitting in there, and Baby Yoda basically comes out from around the ship and like runs at Mando, and he's like, "Where'd she go?" And so they run off. They find her, and Baby Yoda's trying to like bob for apples in the hot spring. Like he's looking at, they're floating, and he like reaches out, and Mando's like, "Stop! Like don't do that." And so he's trying to like get him back into the container that she had him in, and Baby Yoda decides to crack open a nice cold one, a nice cold spider egg, and eat that. And that somehow causes every other spider egg in the cave to break loose. And so they start getting chased by these ginormous spiders, which I think we've seen before in Rebels. Am I correct?
It wasn't even an ice planet though, but there was some spiders on Rebels. But also, this was based off of Ralph McQuarrie art for Dagobah, I think.
Really?
The big spider. I mean, they're all the
Oh.
same spider basically, but like the idea of this sort of giant spider with like a mouth hanging off of its
Hmm.
face came from Ralph McQuarrie, as so many other Star Wars designs do. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I really liked the design for these spiders. And originally in the concept art that's shown at the end of the episode, they were concepted to have like eyes all over their thorax. And so they were going to have like a ton of eyes like all over their body. But they changed it to have them just near like the head area. Um, I think that personally looks more intimidating somehow. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but they're scary, man. Like they're quick too. Like they're running. Also, Frog Lady gets dressed really fast. Um, and they're running back to the ship. And Frog Lady starts like hopping like an actual frog, like all fours. She's booking it. Mando's run too, and they're still catching up. Like these little suckers are fast, and even the big ones are really moving. And they finally make it back. And I know we said that this was tense at the beginning of the episode, but like I've never feared for a main character's safety in this show. Uh, and then at this point, I was like, wow, Mando might actually get hurt, and or Baby Yoda might get hurt in some extent. And it was the first
Mm-hmm.
time I've ever thought that maybe Baby Yoda would get hurt,
Yeah.
especially when he gets one on his head once he gets into the Razor Crest. Um, what else do you think made it as tense as it did?
The fact that it was all preventable. Like,
Yeah,
like this was all like Mando's fault. Like everything from crashing on the planet to evading the X-wings to not taking care of Baby Yoda. Like everything sort of stems from his sort of crappy parenting. And so the fact that like you get some genuine scares in there, and they make you mad because of how preventable they are, it created for an interesting experience.
it's another example of how Mando's thoughts may not always be the best option in every situation. Sometimes he needs to do what people ask him to do. Because then you
Yeah.
don't end up getting chased by giant spiders. Um, but anyway, so they get into the ship, which is still riddled with holes, except for the cockpit. Baby Yoda gets one on his head and starts like crying, and it gets shot off his head, and Miss Frog Lady over here pulling out the hidden blaster, blasting some spiders off Baby Yoda's head, basically saving his life like a legend. Even though he was eating her children, basically. Uh, so the question here is: do you think that Frog Lady knew that like Baby Yoda was eating her kids? Or were there so many of
Yeah.
them that she like couldn't tell that some were missing?
I think she definitely could tell that there was a difference in the amount of eggs. And I mean, she saw Mandalorian try to she saw Din try to like prevent Baby Yoda from sucking one up, and then later she like at the end, the very last scene, like she like puts her hands around the incubator to make sure he didn't like go for any. So I think she's pretty aware, but also like either they don't show as much emotion, like visible emotion as humans, or like
Yeah.
she either that or she knows that it's ultimately uh as long as she has a few that they'll survive.
Maybe it's a thing like with fish where a lot of the eggs don't. I don't know exactly how like frog reproduction works, but I know that with fish will have a lot of eggs and not all of them will survive anyway. So if like some of them get eaten, the fish are like kind of okay with it.
Yeah, I think it's called like K species or something like that, where like they're the type of animal that like they go for quantity over quality. Like they produce as many as possible and like hope that they survive. And then like they don't actually they're not the kind of species that like parents. Whereas you get like animals, I forget their classification, but like it's like they have a few offspring and then they like take care of them as they're growing up and like they
Yeah.
teach
And
them how to hunt and all that stuff.
And I assume since frogs in real life have a lot of like eggs and stuff, this is probably the same way, just on a larger scale with Star Wars. You know, she probably has like a lot of kids, and she's like, if we get a few of them that survive, that's cool. But I know that not all of them are going to survive in the long run anyway. So if Baby Yoda eats a few, good on him. But someone on Steel Wars podcast brought up a good point, in that Mando doesn't feed Baby Yoda. We've never seen him feed him.
Well, he gave him a snack along with Frog Lady in this episode. We saw him. He had like a little box ration sort of thing.
Yeah, but other than that, we've like never. So
Um,
it's no wonder that he's a little hungry, or he just feeds him off camera.
But yeah, it's obvious that he doesn't like go above and beyond. He just gives him his rations that like are there to keep them alive if they get stuck in space. Like it's not like you've never seen him like go hunting for him or anything like that, or like buy him a treat.
Yeah.
So it's funny that this season is starting to address these things that like were in all of our heads, but like didn't think were gonna be addressed.
It's the small things like in Fast and Furious, why do we never see them at a gas station? Or like, why do we never see action heroes reload? You know,
Yeah.
it's like, why don't we see Baby Yoda get fed?
Even bathrooms, like he mentions the privy, like that's the first time that any of that sort of has been addressed.
No,
in this show.
No, first episode, the blue guy asked if he could go remove himself. That's why that was his excuse to get out of the cockpit.
What did he call it?
I don't remember, but he said he hadn't done it in a few weeks, which was, I mean, that was a lie probably, but I don't exactly remember what he called it, but he did have to find the bathroom.
Yeah.
So this is the second time, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just one of these little like concepts that we've all been thinking about, and we were like, we're okay with not knowing, because ultimately it doesn't matter. He probably just feeds him when the camera's not, rolling.
Yeah, but except for this time where like it actually has a story effect. Like we're starting to see an emotional, like I wouldn't call it a rift necessarily, but there's emotional consequences to him and Baby Yoda when he doesn't take care of him the way he should.
Yeah, and let's be honest, I don't want to see Mando feed Baby Yoda in every episode. Don't take up screen. Really? You want to see him like take like 5 minutes of the episode just to be like, here is food, eat.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a full-on like Gordon Ramsay montage, but like like to see Baby Yoda munching on something would be nice. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I enjoy seeing him munch on a little bit, but a lot of these like little things where it's like, oh, he's just doing that off screen, like that. I feel like those don't always have to be addressed like every episode, but like like have this little moment where you really do get to see that he may not feed him as much as he should. He's giving him the rations. Basically, it's survival needs only and no more. But yeah, that's a very important moment there at the end. I have one more question, and I don't remember what it was. Yeah, I don't remember. I think it had something to do with Baby Yoda eating the eggs. Is there anything else you'd like to go into before we talk about some Easter eggs?
So much egg discussion.
Oh, there is. Okay, I remember my question now. This is more egg discussion. Do you think that Baby Yoda is a jerk for eating these eggs, or do you think he's like a bad person for eating, or a bad Yoda for eating these eggs? Do you think that's on him, or do you think that's on bad parenting? And bad parenting on both sides, because Mando doesn't watch him, and Frog Lady doesn't lock up her stupid eggs.
I mean, what kind of question is that though? Like when your little sisters were like toddlers and they like stole candy, or I don't know, like put dirt in their mouths, were you like, does this make her a bad person?
Yes.
What is the morality of eating sand?
Like, I did that every time. I don't think I did that every time. But then my mom was like, Spencer, you're 7. Chill out.
Was she like, Spencer, you're a bad person, stop eating sand?
No, not quite that. I had stopped before I was 6.
Well,
at some
but I mean,
point.
yeah, I mean, if you just look at like the montage of Queel training IG-11 and sort of just talking about like droids being what you imprint upon them, that's that's what this is going for. I feel like it's just
Yeah,
like he's a baby. He's gonna go for his impulses. He's gonna care for people. He's also gonna care for himself. He's gonna
yeah.
be cute. He's gonna be moody. Like it's like just expect that to it comes with training, I guess. It's not just like it doesn't make him automatically bad for eating unfertilized eggs.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's just that's one of the questions I know has been thrown out with like every podcast and every article. Is it like, is Baby Yoda a bad person for eating frog? It's like, no, he's a baby.
It's I mean it's on the negative side of the spectrum, but it doesn't and by any means like suggest that he will go dark. It's not even the darkest thing he's done. I feel like the worst thing he's done is choke Cara Dune, because
Yeah,
that's when he's actually like displaying his rage.
yeah, but
This is just sort of like a mischievous sort of, he's not really understanding the situation and he's hungry, so he's gonna
this
go
is a
for the
big. This is a
obvious
big.
food in a pretty blue tank.
Yeah, this is a big baby going for the cookie jar on top of the refrigerator moment. It just reminds me of that. But I also think that Frog Lady probably could have locked up her eggs or made them somewhat childproof. Although I will give her the benefit of the doubt. She didn't know that she was necessarily going to be traveling with a baby who might eat her eggs. So I'll give her the benefit of the doubt a little bit. There is another little CGI thing that I want to talk about, and it's the fact that we've never seen Baby Yoda move this much as he does in this episode.
That's true.
He's either like been standing still and like his head moving, which is still a puppet, or he's been in the bassinet, which is a puppet, or he's moved for like a few steps, which is CGI. But in this episode, we have like a 30-second shot of him eating eggs, and it's completely CGI. He walks up, opens it, and eats them, or he may not open it CGI, but he's sitting here and eating them like completely CGI for like 30 seconds. And it's
Are you
such a
sure?
yeah, because I
That seemed
remember
like, I mean, and if you have any articles to prove it, go ahead. But like, I feel like that seemed like it was puppetry.
it just seemed, I don't know. I haven't done the research on it. It just very much looked like CGI to me and not puppet. But there were so many scenes in this episode where the CGI is more used than, but like well used. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But we've never seen Baby Yoda move this much. And it's really cool to see him like more interacting with the environment and more not just sitting on the side and having Mando take control of him. He's being more independent. He's doing more things for
Sure.
himself.
Yeah.
And that's really cool to see because Baby Yoda's really awesome, and I always like it when I get to see some cute Baby Yoda on the screen. Because
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say he's like the most popular part. I mean, he's definitely the most popular part of the show. But he's not always the best part of the show. There's a lot of other
Like,
great
you
things.
don't necessarily come to the show for him specifically.
Yeah, but I would also love to see him.
But I
uh,
feel like part of that with us is that we were already interested in it before he was even revealed.
yeah, true.
Whereas some people didn't really know much about it, weren't following, and then it was immediately a hit, and they're like, "Well, I've got to watch this show because Baby Yoda is the cutest thing ever."
I agree. Yeah. Are there any other things you want to talk about besides eggs in this episode?
Ants. So this episode was directed by Peyton Reed,
Yes.
acclaimed director of Bring It On, and not no, those were the Russo brothers who did You, Me, and Debris. So never mind. The only ones I know are Bring It On and like these little like movies called Marvel movies, Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Yeah, this was gonna be
And
in my Easter egg section. Let's do it right now.
I thought we already did the Easter egg
Oh,
section.
bet. Let's do it. Dr. Mandible. Is this where you're going?
Yeah.
Dr. Mandible is literally a giant ant in an episode directed by Peyton Reed. This has to be just a direct reference to the giant ant that plays drums in Ant-Man's house when he's faking to be home on house arrest, or just any ant from Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought that was a really awesome nod to Peyton Reed. Also, have we
But
seen?
it's also a fun little. It's another one of these sort of like in jokes that the show is doing towards like the 40, 50-year-olds who grew up with the original trilogy.
Yeah,
Because it was already a Cantina alien that, like, I don't know if it had an action figure, but it was one of those side characters that all the old heads were into, I guess. And like
yeah,
Dr. Mandible was like an EU name, I guess, technically. So yeah, on a lot of different levels, it's just one of those weird nerdy things to include.
yeah.
They're playing Sabak too.
Well, was Dr. Mandible practical because he looked practical?
I would probably bet that he's practical. I don't know though.
He looks so cool. I just want to say, like, Dr. Mandible looks amazing. I saw this. He's part of the species that we first see in a book about Han Solo. I honestly forget the name of the book because I didn't write it down, but I saw it in a YouTube video.
Is this canon?
I think so. I saw it in a YouTube video. I'm not sure. I didn't do much research on it. I was just looking up videos
I
about
mean,
Easter eggs in this.
define first scene, because like he was in A New Hope.
The first time that he's mentioned outside of like A New Hope, or like the first time that his species plays any kind of important role. Han Solo gets stuck on a planet full of this species. Or something along those lines. I didn't do a lot of research on the book.
Gotcha.
But it is the first like major role of this species, apart from A New Hope. But yeah, like you said, they're playing Sabak, and Pelimoto gets an Idiot's Array, which is a hand that Lando got in Solo that won him the game. A very rare hand, which doesn't actually exist in the purchasable version of Sabak. There is no hand called Idiot's Array, but that stinks. But yeah, it's a really cool nod to not just Solo, but just like all the things where we see Sabak being played. We're thinking about maybe doing some videos on the YouTube channel about us playing Sabak. So we'll see how that goes. Stay tuned for that. And then I have another Easter egg here. When Pelimoto and Mando are cooking the Krayt Dragon meat, they're using a repurposed pod racer engine to cook it. And this is a really cool reference to Ronto Roaster, which is a restaurant in Galaxy's Edge that has a giant pod racer engine, basically cooking a piece of meat in the center. That's not actually how they cook their meat, though. If you thought that it was, they cook it regularly. But a really cool reference to Galaxy's Edge, which I have yet to go to, which is really sad. Any other Easter eggs that you found, Christian? Those were all the ones that I found that we haven't talked about.
The droid that was cooking the meat is a Treadwell.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if it's the same droid, but it's the same type of droid that was almost sold to the Skywalkers in A New Hope.
Yes.
The
let's see. The droid that is tending the bar is supposedly the torture droid from Jabba's palace.
Wait, was it in this episode?
Yeah, it was either in last episode or this episode, but in the cantina, the droid working the bar is a reprogrammed torture droid, the one that we see in Jabba's palace that threatens to torture R2.
Yeah, and in an episode in chapter 5, the gunslinger of episode 1 or season 1, it was voiced by Mark Hamill, but I doubt they got him back. It was just sort of in the background for this episode. I think.
I don't think he speaks in this episode. But that was another cool reference. I wouldn't doubt that tread droid, I forget what they're called. I don't doubt that it may be the one that was almost bought by the Skywalkers, considering she has R5. So maybe the Jawas came and she bought both of them. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. Who knows? But yeah, another cool reference to some of the originals. I'm trying to think of other Star Wars connections. I don't have any. Do you?
I'm thinking of a music connection that I heard, that when the X-Wings came in at the end, I heard something in the music that sounded slightly like Rogue One, like the Rebels theme from Rogue One.
Yeah.
I'd have to double check it, and I'd also have to check out the score. But guess what? They haven't been releasing the scores for these season 2 episodes, which sucks. Get on that, Disney. I don't know why they dropped the ball. But yeah, I'll get back to you on that. It could have just been a coincidence, but it seems sort of like the Rogue One theme used for those X-wing pilots.
All right, very cool. Yeah, we'll do that whenever those come out. We'll get you to do some. We might even do like half an episode about just the score, and you can compare that to other things. Are there any other things you want to talk about this episode? I know this is a bit of a shorter episode. Not that this is a worse episode of The Mandalorian, just a little bit shorter, not as much happening, it's more trivial stuff, I guess, in this episode.
It's also refreshing though,
Yeah, it
because
is. I like it.
I don't want the weekly episode of this podcast to just be like, oh, and they did this, and this character came back, and this was a reference to this thing from the action figures.
Yeah, it gets
It's
tiring eventually.
Yeah, it's fun that this was just entirely just a little story. Um, a lot of it was sort of action based. And maybe down the line we'll get a different episode that's not action based. Maybe it'll just be two characters talking for the entire episode. That would be cool too. With I don't know, and I like that there's varying degrees of like Star Wars connections and about every episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And we may not have freaked out like we did about Anakin's pod racer about some Star Wars. Like that was epic though. Like I said last week, it's gonna be really hard to top that Easter egg. Like that was really cool.
Yeah.
But since we are doing a little bit of shorter episode, I will take this time to give you guys a little update about the podcast. I don't think we've said this yet, but over Christmas break, so after Mandalorian ends, Christian and I have both said we will have been going for almost 2.5 months straight weekly. And this is the first time that we've ever done like a weekly podcast. We normally are very irregular. And it's going to be Christmas time. We're both going to be wanting to spend time with our families. I'm going to be wanting to spend time with not only my family, but my girlfriend's family. And so it'll be a little hard for us to record. So what we've been doing is we've been recording our conversations before we record. And they're not always about Star Wars. They're a lot of NBA talk near the beginning of the podcast. And then just random stuff. And we'll be compiling those into episodes and releasing those weekly during December. So you still will get episodes of the podcast, but they're going to be just banter episodes of us just talking about random stuff. So you'll still get to hear us, and we'll talk about stuff that's not just Star Wars. But we'll be back in January. We do not know exactly what our series is going to be yet in January, but we will let you guys know as soon as we know. Lastly, we do have a shout out for a smaller podcast here at the end of this episode that I would like to shout out personally. My good friend Dakota has a podcast called the Gnag Podcast. If you guys want to look it up, it's available on Spotify and Apple Podcast. GNAG Podcast. He talks about everything under the sun. He talks about gaming, he talks about Star Wars, talks about Marvel, and I will be a guest on that this weekend, talking about what it's like to do podcast. So it'll be really interesting. Go check out his podcast. You good? I like it when you blow into because like you can still hear you going into your mic. Anyway, we like thank you guys for listening to this episode of Mornings with the Mandalorian. If you guys want to go check us out, we have newly started an Instagram, a Facebook, and a Twitter. All just look up Last Star Wars Pod on those three. Go follow us. You'll get notifications whenever we release episodes, and you can just get cool behind the scenes looks of when we're recording or other things like that. Also, go check us out on YouTube the Last Star Wars Pod on YouTube. We're going to start uploading our podcast on there as well. So if you want to go watch that, go give us a subscribe, whatever button you have to press on whatever app you're listening to. And also just email us anything you want to talk about, anything at all. Just send us an email, laststarwarspod@gmail.com. Anything else from you, Christian?
I've spoken.
Thank you, Christian. I think we've all spoken in this episode. But thank you guys
I'm
again.
done speaking. I'm no more speaking. Podcasting is exhausting.
All right. Can I end the episode now?
I prefer if you ended it rather than talking about ending it.
Okay. Thank you guys again for listening to this episode of Mornings with the Mandalorian, and we'll see you next week.